I want to talk about the Colts and Indiana. And the Colts are not entertaining, at least not in a positive sense. I guess you could argue that the drama and things of that nature when it comes to the Colts are entertaining. But from an on the field perspective, watching the Colts is dull, boring, frustrating at times. And Indiana, it's a blast because you know exactly what you're going to get. The Colts are nothing short of terrible this year, while the Indiana Hoosiers are one of the best teams in all of college football. Very much looking forward to where the College Football Playoff Committee ranks them tonight. And Indiana this year has found a way to turn things around while the Colts have peddled in mediocrity for the last 8 years. And last night, as I was prepping for the show, I was thinking about this, and I was like, what's the difference? Like, why has Indiana turned things around while the Colts can't seem to figure it out? Like, what is the difference? Why is Indiana able to squeak out a win against Michigan while the Colts are struggling to close out close games? Why is Indiana blowing out bad teams while the Colts can't beat the Jags, who are awful, and they can't beat the Packers, who didn't have Jordan Love? You know, that's all the way back in week 2. Like, why are these things happening? Like, why is Indiana so much better than the Colts are? The Indiana football team and the Indianapolis Colts couldn't have more opposite seasons. Like, why is that? And as I was pondering on this question last night, I came up with 3 things. I think there are 3 key differences between Indiana and the Colts. And I think it speaks to why the Indiana Hoosiers are having success for really the first time in their history when it comes to football. And the Colts continue to struggle despite having a pretty decent history between Andrew Luck and Peyton Manning. Okay, like people that are alive and are Indiana fans and Indianapolis Colts fans, or people who just understand the landscape of college football and the NFL, know that the Colts have been relatively successful over the last, well, before the last 8 years. Really, they were highly successful, and then Indiana has been bad for forever. Like, why has Indiana turned it around while the Colts, who have a decent history of winning, they haven't been able to? What is the difference? I've come up with 3. I think there are 3 differences between Indiana and the Colts. There are differences in the amount of drama. The people at the top of these 2 different organizations are vastly different. And there's a difference in the understanding of the personnel on each of these teams. The Colts, as of right now, they're nothing but drama. Okay, this is like a middle school girls only class. Like, there's just drama everywhere. People are talking too much. There's complaining about other people. It's not great. Everyone's more concerned about who's playing quarterback as opposed to why they're losing games. You got captains saying that other guys aren't working very hard and that the preparation isn't there. And then you've got other captains, other important guys like Quentin Nelson. He said in his press conference yesterday that he doesn't really feel that way. People want to know why Anthony Richardson isn't playing and so on. Like when you sit down and you listen to these press conferences involving Shane Steichen, none of it is about what's happening on the field. Everything is about what's happening off the field. Why are your captains saying this? Are you seeing the same thing with the lack of preparation? Why isn't Anthony Richardson playing? Why haven't you gone back to Anthony Richardson? Why is Flacco still playing? It is nothing but drama. And it is dang near impossible to be productive in anything, at any place of work, a law firm, a doctor's office, a radio station, an NFL football team, an NBA basketball team, Walmart, wherever. It is dang near impossible to be productive at any place of work when there is nothing but drama going on. When you look at Indiana, though, you don't hear from anyone on that team. You hear absolutely nothing. You hear from Coach Cignetti, who's pretty tame for the most part. He's had 2 really quotable things this year, right? He had the Google Me quote. And at Big Ten Media Days, he was like, I've been predicting to finish second to last in the conference twice, and I've played in the conference title game both times, or whatever he said. Outside of that, you don't hear a peep from that guy. He just puts his head down and he goes to work, and his players follow suit. You don't hear a peep from those players either. Curtis Rourke went on the Jim Rome show yesterday. It's one of the more popular, sports radio shows, sports media shows, because they're on Twitter and all that in the country. I didn't know that until this morning. And I bet a lot of people didn't know about it. And here's the thing. You didn't need to know about it. I went back, I watched the interview. Curtis Rourke said nothing. There is no drama for that team. Now, if that team was, 4-6 instead of 10-0, would things be different? Probably. But as of right now, there's no drama on that team whatsoever. While the Colts can't seem to stay off the front page of the news for all the wrong reasons, Indiana isn't really talked about nearly as much as they should be, because there's absolutely no drama with Indiana. They just show up, they win football games, they go to class, they go to practice, they win again on Saturday, and then they just repeat the cycle. There's nothing extra going on with the Indiana Hoosiers outside of winning. While with the Colts, it's a lot of losing, and it's a lot of worrying about other things that don't have to do with football. And that is not a fun place to be. Okay, like it's not fun to work in a place as well where there's no trust in the people above you. That is the second difference between the Indiana Hoosiers football team and this Indianapolis Colts team. Okay, the players in Indiana clearly believe in Curt Cignetti, and of course they should. He's done nothing but deliver on his promise of winning. Okay, Curt Cignetti is clearly about winning and making sure that everyone in the IU football buildings are pulling in the same direction to ensure that happens. That is entirely different from what the Colts have going on. Now, Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard clearly want to win. Okay, their jobs depend on their ability to win games. But I'm not convinced that Jim Irsay wants to win. At least not enough for the Colts to be successful. Okay, in the NFL, in a highly competitive league, you just wanting to win isn't really enough. You have to be crazy about it. And I'm just not convinced that Jim Irsay's crazy about winning anymore. One of my favorite stories about Jim Irsay is before the Colts won the Super Bowl against the Bears. He had Booger McFarland come into his office, a guy who'd played in the Super Bowl before, and Jim Irsay asked him all these questions about how is it different, because he knew that his franchise had never been there before, and he wanted for them to be prepared and ready for all the differences of playing in the Super Bowl versus playing in a regular season or a playoff game. And Jim Irsay just doesn't strike me as being willing to do stuff like that anymore. And when you look at, the history of the Colts over these last 8 years, there's just some interesting things that I think point to Jim Irsay not wanting to win. It is year after year after year of Chris Ballard not spending all the money that he can in free agency. It's a little fishy. People have floated the theory that Jim Irsay isn't allowing him to spend as much money. I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't know if this continues to happen. Then I think it's a fair question to ask. Irsay getting involved in the benching of Anthony Richardson, I think, points to not really caring all that much about winning. It points more to we want to have a good image, which is important. But look, if you want to win, you got to let the young quarterback develop at some point. Bringing in Jeff Saturday a couple years ago to be the interim head coach points to him not wanting to win. Jim Irsay is more concerned with the previous success of the Colts and putting players in the ring of honor than he is with winning currently. He's completely ignored the present. Look, if I had a boss that spent more time thinking about the former talent and the former radio hosts that he used to manage more than me, then I probably wouldn't be very good at my job, and I probably wouldn't have improved as quickly as I have. Okay? This is said all the time in sports because it's true. Everything starts at the top. Curt Cignetti is at the top of the Indiana program, and he is about nothing but winning. And that's a large part of why they win. Jim Irsay is no longer all about winning. Jim Irsay is all about honoring the past when the Colts were good. So while the Indiana Hoosiers win football games on Saturdays, the Indianapolis Colts put guys in the Ring of Honor as opposed to winning football games on Sundays. The last difference between Indiana and the Indianapolis Colts has to do with coaching. I like Shane Steichen. I do. I think he's going to be a good coach. I don't think he's necessarily a bad coach right now. I think he's just with a bad franchise. But Coach Cignetti has done a much better job in Bloomington in a shorter amount of time than Shane Steichen has done here in Indianapolis. The biggest difference is that when you watch Indiana on Saturdays, it feels like Curt Cignetti knows what he has. Whereas there are times where I watch Shane Steichen and I see some of the decisions that he makes, and I'm like, does this guy know who's on his team? Like with Indiana, I never feel like players are asked to do something that they can't. Just take the offense, for example. Curtis Rourke is great at the RPO reads. Like he just is. I feel like he never misses a read. That's why he's only thrown five. That's why he's only turned the ball over 5 times this year. He's thrown 5 interceptions. That's it in 10 games. Okay, because he reads RPOs well. And because he does that so well, what does IU do on offense? They run a lot of RPOs. Okay, the Hoosiers have multiple good running backs, so they run the ball a lot. They run the ball on average 38 times per game, and they only throw it 28 times per game. And of those 28, I'm willing to bet that 18 to 20 of them are RPOs because that is what Curtis Rourke is good at. When you watch the throws as well, everything is an easy slant, it's an easy curl, and then from time to time, they'll take a deep shot, and the deep shot is usually to Surratt because he's good at making contested catches, he's fast, and all those things. The play calling makes sense. What Indiana asks their players to do makes sense. It's never super risky because Curt Cignetti knows that they have an elite defense that can keep them in games. Everything that Indiana does makes sense in terms of how they use their players and what they ask them to do. Then you look at the Colts, and they do stuff like only give Jonathan Taylor the ball 5 times in the second half when he rushes for over 100 yards in the first half. That happened on Sunday, if you didn't know. You probably did because it was a major topic on Twitter. The Colts do things, or Shane Steichen does things like ask Anthony Richardson to throw the ball 30-plus times when they know he's not a great thrower of the football. And they do the same thing with Joe Flacco. While they have one of the best running backs in the NFL and Jonathan Taylor standing behind him, they're like, no, let's let the 39-year-old turnover-prone quarterback air it out 35 times. It just doesn't make any sense. The offense doesn't make sense. There are so many moments where I ask the question of like Coach Steichen, why are you doing that? Like, why are you calling a timeout to preserve some extra time to maybe get the football back when every time you've done it this year, it has led to the other team getting points because your defense can't get off the field on 3rd down? Stuff like this happens every single week. And at some point, Shane Steichen has to learn what he has. Okay, outside of that, defensively, I'm not going to gripe too much. The Colts give up a ton of yards, but they found a way to force turnovers and keep teams off the scoreboard, so I'm not going to complain too much about that. But that's another major difference. I never wonder why Indiana does anything. Everything that they do makes sense, while I find myself questioning the Colts' decisions during games all the time. Those are the 3 differences between these 2 teams, and it's why Indiana is 10-0, undefeated, trending upward, probably going to be ranked in the top 5 tonight. Indiana doesn't have drama. The Colts have a ton of it. Indiana has leaders at the top that care about winning. Jim Irsay cares more about the past. Indiana understands their personnel, and the Colts don't. That's why Indiana's undefeated, 10-0, one of the best stories in college football. And the Colts look like they're going to miss the playoffs.